Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chaya. I'm Elaine Tanimura. I'm Executive Project Manager with PamTen, and I have the privilege of moderating our first panel today on leadership and mentorship. We have, I've seen two panelists online. I'm hoping the third one joins soon. But just to get started, one of the components of SheTek is to empower women in technology roles. Developing leadership skills is part of the process. SheTek provides monthly webinars called The Outlet with a variety of leadership topics to help you build your confidence, your network, and your skills. So today's panelists are all successful technology leaders, and they will be sharing their stories and experience with you. So we're going to get started by having the panelists introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Shale, Jane? If you could introduce yourself, Shale, and also define what leader means to you.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure to be here on this panel, and I'm looking forward to a very constructive conversation. I'm trying to start my video. Okay. So a brief intro on myself is that I am fortunate enough to have started 3 technology companies in New Jersey over the last 25 years. And fortunately, all 3 were successful. I currently work for Accenture, which is a large global systems integrator. And I am in charge of their data and AI practice globally. So that's a little bit of background on myself. What was the question about leadership? I'm sorry, Elaine.
Or define what leader means to you.
Oh, okay. I think what it means to me is, number one, authenticity, that leaders have to be authentic. They have to be collaborative, and they have to be participative as well. And I am a work in progress when it comes to those 3 things. So I strive to excel in those areas. I haven't quite gotten there yet, even though I've been trying for 30 years.
Okay, good. Well, welcome to our panel, and thank you for participating. Next, we have Julie.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon. Julie Dabrowski. I am the Chief of Staff and Operations at Microsoft, supporting our Northeast Enterprise Commercial Region. I've been in this role only since July, but I've held a variety of both sales and sales leadership roles at Microsoft for almost 9 years now. Actually started my career in technology kind of on a whim. It wasn't something I was looking to get into. I had a friend that got a job in an inside sales program almost 20 years ago in Boston, and decided to take the leap and interview for the role. I was in Pittsburgh, born and raised there, and made the move. And it was one of the most incredible decisions and life-changing of my life. I had no idea of the industry or of the different roles and opportunities that were in technology. I feel like at this point, as things have evolved, almost every role is dependent in some capacity on technology. So that's a little bit about me. In terms of leadership, I feel like you don't have to be in a manager role to be a leader. So that's the first thing that I want to call out. When I think about leadership, I think about it's the people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and do what they're asking anyone else to do. I think, to Shale's point, it's got to be super collaborative. I think it's the people that can really create clarity on a mission around what's expected and why it's expected. I think it's, you've got a big responsibility to generate energy around what you're asking others to do and what that mission kind of is. And then also having the ability to deliver success in any capacity across, the different priorities that you have as a role. So for me, that's what leadership is.
Great, thanks, Julie. And Kristen?
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
So just like you to introduce yourself, Kristen, and tell us what leader means to you.
I love this question, but more so excited to share time with everybody. The conference has been amazing. I have to say, I loved our opening keynote. Oh my gosh. public entrepreneur. I might just coin myself that today in my intro. I thought that was brilliant. So I'm Kristen Malik. I'm the Global Director of Business Diversity here at CDW. Honored and humbled to be able to sponsor the conference, today. I honestly think there's two ways in which we can contribute. We can either be present or participate, and participating, I think, can create more change. So in my role at CDW, to ensure that there's equitable circumstance within our supply chain. So procurement is something that needs to be prescriptive, meaningful, and ensure that our small businesses, our entrepreneurs, our businesses that carry a diverse certification, are having opportunities to collaborate, to compete, in an environment. And that's what CDW's Supply Diversity Program, Business Diversity Program enables. And so with that, when I think of leader, I think that's changed for me over the years. If I were to talk to myself 20 years ago as a new leader, a manager trainee at a Fortune 500 large retailer, as the manager trainee, I was like, oh, I'm in charge. Like, this is awesome. I have a huge P&L, I have a big team, and not so much now. I think there's growth in what leadership is. I think leadership is one of the greatest responsibilities. So when I think of leader, I think of role modeling. So how do I role model integrity? How do I role model being a giver? Because I do think leaders have to give so much. We have to give, time, advice, feedback, and have an ability to forgive too, and be able to keep moving to the mission ahead. So I think leadership continues to get defined by me.
Great. All good definitions to get us started. So what we're going to do now as our format is I'm going to ask each of you a question. One person will be the primary person to answer it. And then if the others want to join in and add anything to it, that'll be good. So our first question is going to be for Kristen. And it is, did you always aspire to become a leader? And can you tell us about your path to leadership?
Did I always aspire? I would have to answer honestly, yes. And I'm sure my mom and my grandmother who raised me would absolutely agree. I think I was definitely the student who wanted to be on student council, president of this club. I wanted to be the cheer captain. And I think for reasons of, okay, how do I be in charge and how do I help the team get to the goal? I felt like I had more control then. And so I think that very differently now as I lead a global team. It's very much less about control and making me being the only one who can maybe get to the finish line. So, but I've always wanted to lead. It's just has changed in so many ways. But I think wanting to lead doesn't make you less of a relentless learner. I think you can learn and lead at the same time. And so while I am comfortable in a leadership role, I am very much a coined relentless learner and wanting to have, make sure I can consume, adopt, flex, and pivot at the same time. So I would say for me, my journey to leadership for sure started in school. And then, when I had the opportunity to work at another organization, another Fortune 500 organization, and took leadership roles there in international leadership assignments, that was meaningful to me. When I became a mom, though, it dramatically changed for me what was a priority. I've talked about this before, but in my prior roles, I really was all about winning, and I loved chasing a sales number. I loved EBITDA. I've told this before, I wanted my license plate to say EBITDA because I was just quite obsessed with it and winning. When I became a mom, though, to Caitlin, and Caitlin being born with Down syndrome and being part of the disability community, you can imagine how that minimized the obsession with sales numbers and EBITDA. I then found myself being very consumed with marginalized communities, because when I shopped and dined, I didn't really see anybody with the disability community out and about. And I wondered to myself, where are they? Where is the disability community, or where is somebody with Down syndrome? And so it really created this healthy obsession of we need to begin to have broader conversations with marginalized communities, especially around the big three: employment, education, and healthcare. And so I prefer to lead in those arenas, and I prefer to be led in those segments as well, because I think the more conversations we're having about prescriptive change and inclusive behavior and equitable procurement to create multiplier effects in our economies, the better. And I'll participate in that all day long.
Very good. And I know you shared that story before, Kristen. So it's a good story, and it just shows what's really important at the end of the day. Shale or Julie, anything that you'd like to add?
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting off mute there. Yeah, so I would say I feel like I've gone back and forth on wanting to be in leadership roles. And when I say leadership, I mean kind of managing people, leading teams, versus being an individual contributor, because I feel like where I am in my life certainly has an impact on how much I can take. And I'm one of those people that's like, yes, yes, yes. Somebody asked me to do something and I say yes. So that's been a big development opportunity for me over the past couple of years. I had a really great leader a couple of years ago, and he was like, you've got to say no. Just try it. It feels good. It's empowering. And sure enough, like once I started to figure out, or even just asking myself, like, can I take this on? If I take it on, what do I have to give up? And making sure I am giving something up, because I can't do it all. I think, that's kind of impacted where I want to go with my career and what I could take on or what I was willing to take on. So it's certainly been an evolution, one that I continue to be on. And so I think that now I'm at a point where I'm excited. I love being in leadership roles. I love leading teams and having the opportunity to have the greater impact and really drive a culture that is focused on diversity and inclusion. And so that part is exciting to me, but definitely things to consider, because sometimes you do lose your time when you're in leadership roles.
Right. I know someone once said to me, sometimes you have to say no to say yes.
Yes.
So, Shale, anything to add?
No, I think as I was thinking about, the question, I don't know if there was a specific point in time when the switch happened in my career, but the only thing I can say is that the reason I have enjoyed playing a leadership role is because it gave me an opportunity to add as much value as I could to whatever endeavor I was in. And it also was a way for me to get to the results that we were striving for. I felt more that I could contribute more to the results that we're getting to. But I don't actually remember. As far as back as I was going in my thinking, I was the president of my school union as well, students union, and so it just is something that I guess an innate.
Good. Okay. Well, and that leads to another question for you then, Shale. Could you please describe your leadership style and how you lead others?
So, it's interesting. I had dinner with a few friends of mine that I have worked with for over 25 years. These are the companies that I talked about. So I happened to just coincidentally have dinner with them last night, a catch-up dinner. And I asked them, I said, listen, I'm presenting at the panel tomorrow. What would you say is my leadership style is? And the two things that came up was, it says you ask a lot of questions, and you listen. So, and I started thinking about that myself. And being results oriented, the way to get results is to build a team, because teams get traction. To build a team, you need to have trust. And I think you get trust if you're authentic and transparent. And one way to be transparent and authentic is to ask a lot of questions of people, because if your goals that you're setting for yourselves are inclusive, are mindful of others, as well as the real circumstances, you can be authentic, you can generate the trust, and you can get the team built, and then you can get the traction. And I would say the second thing, which is peculiar about me, is that I feed off of other people's energy. All of my best ideas, quote unquote, have come from interactions with other people. So it's really not my ideas. I have had the opportunity to interact with people a lot, and that makes me very participative. You know, my style becomes very participative. And the last thing I would say is that, you know, I'm also a collaborator in general, and I like collaborating with people, which gives me an opportunity to interact, ask a lot of questions, get a lot of ideas as well, but also makes me part of the team, because as Kristen said, that leadership is a responsibility. It is not a privilege. And part of the responsibility is to lead from, you know, behind, which is to become part of the team as well. So those are some of my thoughts on leadership and my style.
Good, thank you. Julie, any thoughts?
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to that, I agree with you know, everything that Shale said for sure. But for me, in terms of my style, like I like to, there's a couple things I like to do. I like to get to know everybody that's on my team working directly for me, and then those working for them as well where I can. So I really like to understand, you know, what their boundaries are so that I can respect those. And then I also like to set my own boundaries and non-negotiables. So people know, like, you can't put a standing meeting on my calendar between 8:10 and 8:30 because I like to walk my kids to school, or I like to walk them to the bus stop. So I think it's important to set those boundaries and then understand what boundaries other people have so that you can be aware of those as well. I'm a big energy giver. And so I think, you know, my leadership style is getting people excited to complete, you know, whatever it is our focus area is, and do the right things to get there. And so those are the kind of the two things that jump out to me when I think about my leadership style.
Good. Kristen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would add for leadership style, I try to stay centered on kind of like a 3A model. So to know what I'm accountable for, what am I holding my team accountable for, be aware. So aware internally, externally, environment. I think especially now and even in last year, you know, there was so much high emotion centered leading that had to be done, right? There was so much perspective and pause that that was just about mandatory. And I even hate to use that word, but it really, there was really a need for emotionally centric leaders to be able to get in touch with their teams in a distributed workforce like we've never seen before. When you were used to maybe seeing your team every day and walking in and catching up, and that was all gone in about 48 hours. And so I think to be really aware, back to the, you know, my second A, is just aware of environment, circumstance, trend, community. It all compounds. And so, you know, accountability, being aware, and then really available. I think for me, being a leader is being available to my team, being available to the problem we're trying to solve, being available to our customers or clients, right? Whatever nature of business you're in, but being available. So the 3 A's for me.
Good. Okay. Julie, I know you were talking about you've gone back and forth between team and independent contributor. So so what skills do you use most often in your leadership role? And how have you grown those skills over time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, my number one skill, I think that I've used, and especially to Kristen's point, over the past 20 months since we've been in this pandemic, has been empathy. And my definition of empathy is not, you know, offering pity or asking how I can help, but sometimes it's just sitting with someone and listening and not saying anything else. but being there with them. And sometimes it's like agreeing with them, like, yes, this does suck. Like what you're going through is awful, and just leaving it at that. So I think empathy for sure. How I've grown that, we actually had a pretty significant investment towards the beginning of 2021, where we encouraged all of our field teams to read a book by Brene Brown called Dare to Lead. I highly recommend it. It really makes you get a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable and not having all of the answers all the time, and being willing to rumble is the words that they use, and not in a negative sense, but being able to ensure that we're painting the right pictures and we're letting our teams know like what done looks like, and here's how we get there. And so that was a really great exercise. Not only did we read it, but we also had weekly, we did a 7-week series, kind of like a book club where we had small groups with facilitators. I had the opportunity to go through it both as a contributor and as a facilitator. So it was a really great experience. I think reading it twice really helped me. And the second skill I will say that is absolutely critical in any leadership role, and I think Shale alluded to this earlier as well, is listening. And sometimes, and knowing when to listen and just shut up, when to ask questions, when to give advice, or when to, continue to dig, so that you can help your team get to a conclusion on their own, or get to an outcome or a next step on their own. And also really having the wherewithal to, encourage people to fail and fail fast, and then learn from that so that they can apply it into whatever they're doing next, and also share that and give people a space to share those learnings, so that we as a broader organization can really get better.
Good, great, thank you. Kristen, anything you'd add to that list? What skill?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I really appreciate that you brought up, empathy, and because I don't think that is, to overuse the word, a buzzword of, right, COVID-19 or a pandemic or economic recovery. It should be here. It should have been here. It's here and should be here to stay as we're all, working together. But being able to be empathetic, you're right, isn't a cry with me. It's really just putting yourself next to them, or trying to relate as much as possible, or being in their shoes. I read a book as well where it's just lead where you are, be where you are. I think sometimes we can get wrapped up, in me personally, of who are we mentoring, who are we getting to the finish line, or who are we leading? And maybe not everybody needs that. Sometimes we just need to be leaned into and just meet them where they're at, instead of being coached, be mentored, right? And so when I think of empathy too, something that I have tried to change in me as a leader as it relates to empathy is just leaning into where they are, and how do we just make them better where they're at, and what they want to work on, and not say you're being coached, right? Or maybe mentored. And that's why I loved the tagline of this. We rise together and we can climb together. But if you're doing that, right, then you have to be able to lift other people with you, right? It doesn't mean they need to be mentored to be on that journey, or coached maybe, or change this, or do this, or be more like that. But that's how I've, taken an approach, I would say.
And thank you for helping us with that tagline for this panel, Kristen. Let's see, Shale, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would say one thing I would add, these are all great comments, by the way. I agree with everything that Julie and Kristen have said. The one thing that I find, and this is a game that we play within Accenture a little bit, is, oftentimes when you're introducing yourself, you say, what's your superpower, right? So it makes you think, what's your superpower? So I was asked that question, and my superpower, I think, is curiosity. And I think being curious is very important, because not only it makes you a lifelong learner, but also it has other advantages, which is you ask questions. And obviously you have to listen once you've asked the question. So it gives you listening time, you ask questions, and you become knowledgeable. But more importantly, the person you're asking the question of, you expand their thinking as well. So I think being curious is very equally as important to me in being a leader.
Good. So some of the things I heard were empathy, listening, and curiosity. So good list. And we could also, maybe we could all think about our own superpower. Very good. So Kristen, I know at the beginning you mentioned when you first started out with a large retail company and you had this team and this responsibility. So with that, do you think that titles are important to be a leader in an organization? And then second piece of this is, how do you differentiate power and authority?
Okay, well, that's a big one.
I'm glad you have it, Kristen.
Yeah. I don't know, was this in a prep one? I remember this one, but I'm going to answer it. I love it. I love this one, Elaine. You know, I think this is important. You know, are they important to me? Well, you know, I think there's always respect, you know, for titles. You can't, I don't know how we would ever escape that, you know, even in all facets of my life. In my organization at CDW, I have respect for all of my teammates, and respect for our C-suite, and great respect for the CEO for everything she carries us for, you know, and everything she leads and how she's led us through that. So I have absolute respect for her as our CEO. You know, in my community, I respect for our principals, our superintendents. I think we need leaders, and we need leaders to have, you know, those titles with that autonomy to make those decisions and lead communities and lead organizations. You know, are we, in what I say personally, have I ever chased a title? No. You know, I think good work gets recognized. And so I have been able to reconcile, you know, with that as well. I think that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. I think you can exhibit leadership qualities, and maybe leader's not even in your title, or maybe you don't even strive to be one, right? It's your organic self. And so I think, again, if we're leaning into just what we offer and we start recognizing people and ourselves, just how we contribute, right? And how we show up, however that, you know, is defined in whatever segment of your life, whether it be school or not-for-profit or Fortune public organization, whatever that looks like, if that's a title, then so be it. But I wouldn't let a title ever detour or change the way I show up. If I'm a vice president tomorrow at CDW, I'm the same Kristen Malik, right? And my legacy will always be integrity, you know, to be a giver, positive thinking, you know, and role model for my two daughters, whether it's director, manager, school board member. So that's how I think, best explain that. That's a big question. I would be interested to read a case study on that.
Shale, or do you want
Yeah,
to add to that?
I personally do not like titles. And let me clarify that. I like roles, not titles, because I think title is a way people use titles to signify their importance, their stature. But, you know, what's more important is, what is your role? So in large companies, you got to have titles because that's how they communicate. But I think I encourage people to have your title, which is, you could be managing director, senior managing director, but what is your role? Okay. Vice president doesn't cut it for me. What is your role? What do you do? So I encourage people to go for roles in addition to titles, and then emphasize it. So if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you know, I just describe what I do for the company, not necessarily what my title is, if you will.
Good. Okay. And Julie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think to some extent, so I think there's two things that come to mind when I read this question. The first is, do I think they're important? I don't think they're super important. I think the other thing you have to think about is, a title at Microsoft could be very different than that same title at Accenture, than that same title at CDW. And so I think they don't always convey the same roles and responsibilities across organizations, right? So I think that's something to certainly keep in mind. especially as you're looking at different opportunities. Don't let a title stop you from exploring something that, like, if you see something on LinkedIn for a title that you're like, oh gosh, there's no way I could be that title. You don't know what that title means at the company unless you actually speak to somebody that's working there. So I think that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I will say is externally, they certainly can mean a lot in interfacing with customers. I'm in sales and have been, and I think that there are certain customers that are only willing to talk to certain titles because they think only that title can get something done, or whatever it is. And so I think that there's a lot of times where we can get those titles involved, but it's really the people that the customers are interacting with on a daily basis anyway that are making things happen, right? So I think there's that external, we need a title in order to convey this level of responsibility within my organization and the power that I have to get things done, versus internally and what that title means. It really goes back to, what are you doing? What are the roles and responsibilities of that title? And then thinking about how that would compare across different organizations that you could be evaluating.
Good. So all great answers. Thank you. So now we're going to switch topics and go from leadership to mentorship. So Shale, I know that this is a passion of yours, and so maybe you can start off by telling us, did you have a mentor on your path to leadership that really made a difference in your career? And then maybe can you tell us about your mentorship experience?
Yes. So obviously, I had a lot of mentors because I need a lot of help. This is like you said, a passion of mine, because I have benefited so much in my career by having mentors. And rather than having one, I actually sought to have multiple mentors. And, frankly, I even rotated my mentors as well, because either I evolved or they evolved, or they stagnated, if you will. So I had several mentors. I had a mentor that told me about strategy, finance, mentor who told me about people. And this guy was in particular, just people loved him, people followed him. And I wanted to learn from that. To me, a value of a mentor is that, you can go to school and get knowledge, but to get wisdom, you need experience. So I always looked for mentors with experience in an area where I was struggling. And I benefited tremendously, by having mentors. And I would strongly encourage that you look for mentors in your life, in your career as well. And there are, certain qualities that I've looked for in mentors that I'd advise anybody who's looking for mentors. One is authenticity. You've got to make sure that they are going to be authentic with you, meaning they're going to give you straight up feedback, okay? Because this is an area where you can share your personal goals, your personal fears with the mentor, and you want to make sure that they're going to, number one, respect the confidentiality, but also going to be very direct and honest and authentic about their feedback to you. You also want mentors who are going to motivate you, encourage you as well, and you should check out the mentors with their mentees, the previous mentees as well, or the leadership styles. Lastly, I think values are important. I think you want to make sure that your values are the same as the values of the mentor as well. For example, if you're about ESG, about social entrepreneurship, you want a mentor that has the same mindset. So I can go on this topic. I don't want to chew up too much of the oxygen in the room, but I would give other people an opportunity to add to this.
Good, thank you. Julie, how about you? Mentor in your career?
Yep. So for me, I feel like I too have had multiple over the course of my career. I also have kind of different cadences, right? Some mentors that I've worked with, I will go to more randomly. Others, and one thing I would suggest is making sure you have a clear purpose when you're asking for mentorship. And so letting that mentor know exactly what component of their skill set it is that you feel like you could continue to develop by working with that person. So I think that part of it is also really important. But yeah, I mean, I've got mentors in my professional life, in my personal life. I think of like my best friend who had kids a couple of years before I did. Like, she is certainly a mentor for me and in the things that she's doing. And so, yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And I think that you will have different mentors through the course of your career. And if you're lucky, maybe one or two that'll stick with you across, multiple roles, multiple companies, that just knows you and has continued to Shayle's point, to progress their career so they can continue to kind of bring you along with them.
Good, good. And Kristen, anything you want to add?
Well, always chat. I love these opportunities. I think for sure, you can't really go wrong with seeking mentorship. Even if maybe the mentor you select or identify doesn't work out, you'll have some learning from that. So I think we should seek mentorship at all stages. I too, like my peers, have had so many mentors, but not too many where it's diluted, right? Each one serves a purpose that I'm clear on and they're clear on, and there's a growth mindset there. But I can, think of two that have been with me since I've been 23, right? Looking at like my first job offer, like paid, like I was moving, into a new role, and I still, text them today for things. And so to have that 20-year legacy is something that's really valuable to me, that I cherish. But I've been at CDW 4 years, and I have, a few mentors, less than I could count on my hand, but a few that I know I stay in touch with, so that one to help either navigate the organization or to bounce ideas off in just an environment that I'm not ready to see fully pitched. So it's okay to have more than one and different, uses, but make sure that you're a giver too, that you're creating value in the relationship as well for them. Mutually beneficial, but not mutually exclusive.
Very good. Okay, so now what about sponsorships? Julie, what's your impression of mentorship versus sponsorships?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think sometimes people throw them around interchangeably. And to me, and in my career, they've been two distinct things. So we just kind of talked about mentorship and what that's been. Those are the people that I'm working with either over a long period of time, or maybe with a specific goal that I have around my development, that I've looked to find somebody that excelled at that skill and that they could help me grow there. From a sponsorship perspective, I like to think of that as it, and again, this is for me, as somebody that actually could have impact or influence on a role that I want, and would be willing to, give a recommendation for me, or that is a part of an interview process that, has said, based on what Julie's done and based on her experience, we think she'd be a great fit in this kind of role. So I look at mentor being really like the long-term career or short-term developmental goals, and then a sponsor being somebody that would be willing to sponsor you or advocate on your behalf for a role that you're looking to get.
Great. Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts about sponsorships?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Julie was saying. I think sponsorship to me is more sort of, it has a specific goal in mind. Mentorship can be pretty wide open in terms of, what you want to get help on, and could be pretty deep as well. And it could be longer term too. So I think that to me is the distinction between sponsorship. I think sponsorship is to a particular goal and an objective, and mentorship, evolves much more, and it's more dynamic.
Good, good. Okay, Kristen, anything that you wanted to add to that one?
I agree with our peers. When I think of sponsorship, it's like an investment, right? Like Julie was alluding to, we are investing in something, or maybe, towards a project or a role. In my mind, I guess how I differentiate right or wrong, like sponsorships, like have an ending, right? So I'd be done sponsoring that project or done sponsoring that effort. And that's okay. Things can end, so new things can start. But a mentorship would be a lasting relationship because we're always in need of mentoring, but I can't say I've always needed a sponsor.
Okay, good. All right. And another question, and we'll go back to Shale for this. Do you think a formal mentorship program can accelerate an individual's path to leadership in this virtual world? And why or why not?
Absolutely. I think mentorship is equally as applicable, and maybe even more so in a virtual world. And for the simple reason is that one of the things that is underutilized in this mentorship relationship is, a good mentor can offer you their network as well. And somebody said before, your network is your net worth. And I've used my mentors as a point of networking as well, because a good mentor, by the sheer number of years of experience they have, they've come across a lot of people who they can bring to the table as well, connect you with. And I think this becomes, in a virtual world, it's harder to meet people, and I think that can help as well. But a formal program, I've always encouraged people to have mentors. Because I've benefited from it, like I said before. So I think a formal program is highly recommended, from my perspective.
Good. Julie, how about you? What are your thoughts on a formal mentorship program, and especially in the virtual world that we're living in right now?
Yeah, I'll say, as it relates, like especially in the virtual world that we're in right now, I feel like we don't always have the proximity that we had when we were in offices, meaning there's a lot that we're probably unaware of because we're not walking around chatting with different people. So there could be certain career opportunities that you would have known about otherwise that you may not know about because everything's virtual and you're not having as many ad hoc conversations with other people in your organization, or even externally with others in other organizations. And so I think having the mentor that potentially has the broader network and could be aware of some of those opportunities would certainly help. And then the other thing I like to think, and this is going back to like my very first mentor ever that I still keep in touch with from 2003. I think sometimes they see things in you that you may not yet have come to the realization about yourself. And so, I think in any role, you have to understand what your goals are and what you want to achieve and kind of what's next and be able to go after it. But I also think there are times when there are opportunities you may not even be considering, that your mentor may say, have you thought about this? And that's happened to me a couple times in my career where I hadn't, or it didn't align with this trajectory that I was going on. It was kind of over here. And so I was like, I don't think I want to even think about that. And then after having that conversation with my mentor, in this one particular instance, it ended up being like the best career decision I ever made. So yeah, absolutely. I think having that formal program is super important.
Oh, good. And Kristen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I think of formal, I don't want us to be intimidated by the word formal. I just think that it's, managed and, there's good guidance, around it. I think what gets measured gets managed. And I think we probably are back to a place where we're measuring hires, we're measuring diverse workforce, we're measuring board seats, right? Things that maybe went away are now back. And so when we measure and carve out time to mentor or be a mentee, that's cataloged activity. And so if that's called formal, then I agree with that. But I do think regular cadence with some guidance, governance that it's happening is all upside. I can't think of a downside to having scheduled meetings where you're talking about aspirations, goals, worries, strengths, things you want to get better, things you want to learn about. And so I definitely encourage formal programs if it means, everything that I kind of alluded to, of that we're going to make sure it's happening, right? And that there's good topics being discussed and that there's value for everybody.
Right. Very good. Okay, well, believe it or not, our time is coming to a close. So I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this panel and sharing your expertise, your stories, your background, and your experience. What I'd like to do now is to just tell everyone on the line, and I think, Kristen, you're probably aware of this as being part of our SheTek Power team, that SheTek is launching a tech mentorship program. And we're really excited about launching this. And really what makes this mentorship program unique is that it's focused on technology and advancing your career in the tech field. And some of the benefits of the program include being matched with a technology leader for 6 months and actually meeting with them at least 2 times per month. We're offering career development workshops. We're offering networking sessions, an alumni community for when you're done with your 6-month program, and sharing job opportunities. So the program is going to launch right now, effective today. You can go to our website at shetek.net and you'll find the page there. And you can sign up as a mentor or a mentee. The fee for the program is $250. If you're one of the first 10 to sign up, you will get a $50 discount. So please go to the page, again, shetek.net, check out all the information. And we're really excited. We have some pictures and bios of some of the mentors that we have already, and we've got a lot more that are available. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining today's panel. And I think we're going to now move over into getting ready for our next session. And yes, Chaya is clarifying that the fee is for the mentees, not the mentors. So thanks, Chaya.